Good evening, everyone. This is group number 2, and today we will talk about native-speakerism. Now, let's talk about some relevant vocabulary. According to Rampton 1990, in an educational context, the idea of being the native speaker of a language and having it as your mother tongue tends to imply five things. A particular language is inherited, either when you are born in a country where the particular language is spoken or you have lived in the foreign country long enough. Inheriting a language means being able to speak it quite well. People are native or non-native speaker of a tongue. When you are a native speaker, you can comprehend the language pretty well. People are usually native speakers of one mother tongue. However, all these connotations are now strongly contested by many people. Native-speakerism, it is the recurrent ideology in the English world, especially in the context of the expanding circle, characterized by the belief that native speakers teachers represent a Western culture that depicts the ideal English language and English language teaching methodology. In this ideology, people have the impression that native English speakers, NNEST, have more linguistic and cultural knowledge, which is believed to make them better teachers than non-native English speakers. In addition to this, it is assumed that students and parents may also prefer NNEST teachers because they believe that they represent the type of people they will interact with in the future. But the assumption that NNEST teachers have enough linguistic knowledge merely because of their nativeness, it is not true in the English teaching world. Keeping in mind the communicative aspect of the language and the terms related to native and non-native teachers, we should refer to the user as experts rather than native speakers, so expertise has the following advantages over nativeness. Experts do not have to feel close to what they know. Expertise is different from identification. Expertise is learned and not fixed or innate. Expertise is relative. A person expert is another person's fool. Expertise is partial. People can be an expert in different fields, but they don't know everything. Expertise goes under a certification process in which the expert is judged by other people. In overall, the notion of expert in the English language education changed the emphasis from who you are to what you know.
What is a non-native speaker? The concept of non-nativeness continues to be used as a way of labeling a group of speakers, which in the case of the English language is certainly much larger than the group of so-called native speakers. In a study carried out by Lagabaster and Sierra, it was found that students tend to prefer native over non-native English-speaking teachers, but that they are aware of some advantages of non-native teachers, and therefore a majority of students would like to have a combination of both native and non-native English-speaking teachers. Bank and Medgyes found that students think that non-native teachers are more demanding and traditional in the classroom. Native speakers are regarded as more outgoing, casual, and talkative. Medgyes sets a question. Is it true that by virtue of having a very command of English, um, native speakers perform better in the classroom? He answers, if language competence were the only variable of teaching skill, a native speaker would by definition be superior to his or her non-native colleague. But as we know, teaching English as a foreign language goes beyond being linguistically competent. What about variables such as experience, age, sex, aptitude, charisma, motivation, training, etc.? They also play a decisive role in the teaching and learning process. Therefore, it seems that language competence is the only variable in which the non-native English speaking teacher is inevitably handicapped. In fact, he distinguishes some outstanding points about non-native English speaking teachers. Number one, only non-native English speaking teachers can serve as imitable models of the successful learning of English. Non-native English speaking teachers can teach learning strategies more effectively. Non-native English speaking teachers are more able to anticipate language difficulties. This helps learners overcome language difficulties. Non-native teachers can be more empathetic to the needs and problems of their learners. Only non-native English-speaking teachers can benefit from sharing the learner's mother tongue, what facilitates the teaching and learning process. Thank you.
Native-speakerism idealizes and promotes teachers who are native speakers, and the concept of non-native speaker is instead associated with deficiency. The widespread impact of native-speakerism includes advantages and disadvantages for both native and non-native speakers. For the non-native speakers, there is discrimination in employment and customer preference. Teachers are still questioned about their English because of their names and appearance. They are not expected to author textbooks, curricula, or major academic works. They are considered culturally deficient. And authenticity in English lessons is considered to depend on native speaker language and cultural content. The main disadvantage for the native speaker is that they are reduced to a list of sellable attributes of a speakerhood role and discriminatory employment practices, not recognizing their wider professional role. The starting point to disarm this native speaker cycle is the belief that everyone has cultural proficiency, understanding that being a native speaker has nothing to do with the abilities to teach a particular language, and the fact that there should no longer be research to prove the value of teachers who are labeled non-native speakers. Native speaker and non-native speaker concepts affect language teachers, categorizing them and deprofessionalizing English language teaching by endorsing inequality instead of valuing teachers' pedagogical and linguistic skills. Critique indicates that this is a form of linguistic imperialism and promotes global politics of ELT, where the recognition that English is a global language creates a paradigm of political and economic power. What maintains this paradigm are the native speaker networks, which affect movements and identities. Networks are strengthened by ideologies, practices, and policies, and they become powerful because of employment policies, promotion of native speakerism, teacher strengths, and accent ideologies. Networks require ongoing work to be sustained, so moving beyond these labels and paradigm is an essential step for English language teaching to move forward as a profession. The key for this is to understand that proficiency comes from education and experience, not birth, and so native speakers cannot be assumed to have superior proficiency in all skills.
Talking about the status of the native speaker in language teaching, there is a contrast in positions. Cook discusses some literature where the role of the native speaker in language teaching has been a source of concern, an issue associated to power and status, where the native speaker concept has political and economical benefits for the countries from which the language originated, and also oversees its role as the imposition of native speaker interaction norms and culture. While on the other hand, Erling points out that the native speakers have been wrongly entitled as the villains, the privileged, and the beneficiaries of the spread of English as a result of globalization, and the responsible of the destabilization of a traditional culture. To focus on the native speaker in language teaching, it is necessary to look at these terms. The first one is competence, which is a neutral term in linguistics for the native speaker's knowledge of language, without judging if it is good or bad. Multi-competence, which is also a neutral term for the knowledge of more than one language, free from evaluation against and outside the standard. Cook emphasizes that multi-competent minds that know two languages are qualitatively different from those of the monolingual native speaker in a number of ways. So L2 users have to be looked at in their own right as genuine L2 users, not as imitation native speakers. Cook advocates that language teaching should be placed more emphasis on the student as a potential and actual L2 user and be less concerned with the monolingual native speaker, so that she addresses some suggestions for language teachers. The first one is to set goals appropriate to L2 users. There should be a balance between internal and external classroom goals. The second, to include L2 user situations and roles, that is not just the native speaker in all roles as usually happens with the course books, but involving foreigners facing real situations. The third one is using teaching methods that acknowledge the student's L1. More than minimizing the role of the L1, multi-competence theory supports the development of links between the languages. And the fourth one, to base teaching on descriptions of L2 users. According to Cook, L2 learners' battle to become native speakers is lost before it has begun, because the goal is not imitating native speakers, but getting the skills to be a good L2 user.